It's clear when David Zaslav was thinking how to construct a successful DC live-action universe, he was looking at what Kevin Feige did at Marvel Studios, but once he took over WB and got a really deep look in what was going on with the DCEU, the Batman and the Joker, he simply understood that wasn't possible. You know, it's very difficult to create one defined successful universe. Also, it's very shackling because once you get into one defined universe, you cannot do anything else. How can you have a Joker series, you know, a film series, a Joker film series, and do a sequel like they're doing, or the Batman sequel, and, you know, embrace Matt Reeves' universe if you're going to do one defined franchise? So what I'm being told now, that's not what David Zaslav wants to do any longer. He wants to do universes within universes. Now, this is the original idea that Walter Hamada wanted to do, and he wanted to call it the Worlds of DC. His multiverse strategy is very clear. Zaslav won't be going forward with Hamada's multiverse strategy as such, but he also understands that one defined universe can be very problematic for DC. Just because it worked for Feige in the Marvel Cinematic Universe doesn't mean it's the right fit for DC live action. So what David Zaslav is now looking at, he's looking at the potential of a multitude of DC live action universes. That's obvious what we're going to do, because we are getting a Joker sequel and a sequel for Matt Reeves' The Batman. That's what's going to happen. I think this is a much better fit for DC. So what you can do is you can do these 7 Green Lantern movies as their own thing. You can have the Batman universe, the Joker universe, as I say, and the DCEU or whatever live action, you know, kind of contained universe they want to do. You can still have a defined, connected universe, which doesn't interfere with Constantine, which I don't think will be part of the DCEU. I think that will be dumb to squeeze it in there. You want to let things, you want to give things space to breathe. Let Constantine be its own thing. Let the Batman universe be its own thing, and the same with the Joker universe. And I think now Zaslav understands one defined universe doesn't work for a studio like Warner Brothers Discovery. And what happens is you take away the potential of doing so many great things. Now, I'm hearing you screaming at the back there saying, isn't this going to be confusing? No. Hamada's multiverse strategy would have been a lot more confusing. What you do in this way, you just say, listen, we're going to have a connective universe. We're going to have the Batman universe. We're going to have a Green Lantern universe. We're going to just have these, you know, unconnected universes. And it'll be obvious they're unconnected with the way we go with them. You give your creatives freedom. Now, this is great news if you want to restore the Snyderverse, because Zack Snyder can come in and continue his Justice League movies. And if Ben Affleck wants to, he can make the Batfleck movie. And we are going to talk about the Ayer cut a little bit later on today's video, because I'm very passionate about that. I think it's disgusting that Zack's movie was released, but David's movie wasn't. You know, it's disgusting to me that somewhere in a vault, the Ayer cut is sitting there gathering dust while we're hearing people say James Gunn's movie was better than David Ayer's movie when we haven't fucking seen David Ayer's movie. The whole situation is disgusting, and you've got people really triggered about Batgirl being shelved, but you're okay with David Ayer's Suicide Squad movie gathering fucking dust. So with Zaslav going this different way now of being able to do DC universes within DC universes, this is great potential to seeing the Snyderverse restored. The Snyderverse is high concept art. It's no difference to what Denis Villeneuve was doing with Dune and what he's going to continue to do with the Dune sequel. There's so much potential in the DC universe if we let this if this one kind of universe of DC, like Zaslav wanted to originally do. He wanted to copy and pattern what Feige had done over at Marvel because it's made money. It's an automatic seller. You have to watch the one movie to watch the other. And with self-contained movies, you don't have to watch them all. You don't feel like you're missing out. But personally, I think if you make some great art, then people will want to come and see. I think things are changing in terms of films now, in terms of comic book universes and franchises. And I think people are starting to recognize, even the people who don't like what Snyder did with DC, that there's a place for Snyder at DC where you just let him do his own thing with his own universe. This is what Zach was talking about, that his Snyderverse had nothing to do with the rest of the DCEU, that once upon a time it did, but then they went their own separate way. Now, it's a bit complicated to suddenly divorce the Snyderverse from the expanded DCEU, considering that basically Man of Steel, BVS, and the Snyder Cut are part of the original DCEU. And there's another complication here as well, because if you separate them, like Gal, Jason, Henry, and all of them are still part of that universe. So how does that work? And look, that's an interesting conversation for sure. These are things that would have to be ironed out. But I certainly feel there's money to be made for Zack Snyder's Justice League 2 and Justice League 3 and Ben Affleck's Batfleck movie. There's money to be made from an air cut, because the air cut doesn't take a lot of money to do. According to David, there's not much to do. It just needs a little bit of polishing. Then it's ready. As I say, we'll discuss that a little bit later on. In fact, very, very shortly. So I think this is where we're going now with the DCEU. We're going to kind of different franchises. Because that's obvious. Because as I said on the top of the show, you can't have a Joker franchise and the Batman franchise when you're saying you're going to do one connective universe. Now, that's what Zaslav's been saying originally. Now, I don't know what his 10-year plan is. Because, as I say, by having these different universes, and he's just greenlit a Constantine movie that clearly has nothing to do with the DCEU as well. So it's clear these films will have nothing to do with each other unless he forces them all to be canon with each other, which I think could be very, very clumsy and potentially may not work. So you're better off just allowing your universe to breathe in different corners rather than force-feeding one cinematic universe. That's worked for the MCU, but even that's getting boring very quickly now. Warner Brothers has the history of making great art, great films, on focusing on the film. And even though the MCU is still really popular with kids and teenagers and everyone basically, they do have a problem from their own making. But the MCU isn't my problem. The DC live action universe is, because I love DC. And I want it to be the best it can be. And I just feel by forcing one connective universe, and if it was done properly, if they started again and done it properly and had the right people doing it, it could be so cool. I agree. But you do have a potential here of just saying, yeah, we can have a little continued universe somewhere, but we can also have these other pocket universes that give these auteur directors an opportunity to do their own thing. And I kind of suspect that's where we're heading now, rather than force-feeding everything together. I'd love to get your feedback about this, because I think this is a very interesting situation, because we don't know what the 10-year plan is. We don't know who's going to run DC Studios. So it's all going to come together ultimately, because Zaslav desperately needs this company to make money, because they are a debt-ridden company. Toby Emmerich really ran WB Pictures into the ground. He is the worst head chair Warner Brothers Pictures has ever had. And Don't Worry Darling, and the purchasing of Don't Worry Darling is proof of that. The film is a fucking clusterfuck with a director who should be basically living in Arkham Asylum. So Emmerich gone. Those mistakes can't be revisited again, where one lot of leadership brings in Zack Snyder and Christopher Nolan and then gets rid of Zack Snyder, has a civil war publicly with said director as the director, goes to the mat against them to get his movie released, which basically we helped that happen. And thank God for that. Thank God the Snyder Cut exists, because the Snyder Cut exists, but the Ayer Cut doesn't, and it needs to. Now, many people may not know this, but composer Stephen Price originally composed the music for David Ayer's Suicide Squad. Now, eventually, Geoff Johns rewrote that movie and decided to force feed radio music, songs in the entire movie, and there wasn't much composed music in it. So they pretty much dumped Stephen's beautiful music. And as I say, there's an Ayer Cut in a vault somewhere gathering dust with his music in that film. I want to hear that soundtrack. It really frustrates me when I go to Spotify and I hear what actually is the soundtrack for David Ayer's, or so-called David Ayer's, Suicide Squad movie. So Stephen had a bit to say to Irish site Joe about this situation. I think the thing I always point to with this is, if you listen to the soundtrack record for that, there is an awful lot of music that you won't hear during the film. I was on the project for a long time and I wrote a lot of music to various cuts. And in the end, that film went the way it went. And obviously there was a change in direction that happened towards the end of it, where a lot of songs came in and various editorial things happened. Putting it mildly and politely, Stephen. For me, it was my second project with David Ayer, and I have a tremendous amount of time for him. I was so proud of the work we did together for Fury. That is still one of the scores that I'm really proud of, and it was a very close collaboration with him. I'm very supportive of all things David. It was a frustrating and tricky time, a hell of an experience in terms of the Hollywood thing, but I'm very proud of the work. It was the first time that I'd recorded in LA, and it was just glorious. You were with these amazing musicians who do this all of the time. And it was a fun time, but it was a frustrating end game. Following that, we asked Price directly, is there another edit of Suicide Squad that he wished audiences had seen instead? Price told us. I'd always rather audiences see the version that had all of the music in it. I mean, things exist, but who knows in the politics of that world what could ever happen. Certainly you can see, even from the titles on the Score album, there were a lot of things that you didn't see. Stephen Price's performance of Our Planet, blah, blah, blah. We don't care about that. I'm sure it's really great because Stephen Price is a great composer. But this is interesting. Now, David Ayer told us this a very long time ago, that there is a fucking awesome composed soundtrack for the Suicide Squad. Stephen himself, the very composer who did this, says there's a version of this movie with his music in it. He also talks about a very frustrating time. And this is the studio system. Now, this is something that I found myself when I went to Hollywood. I found their mentalities very, very frustrating, because you feel as an artist, you can do something. You have a vision. And they want to cut it to pieces and make it viable for a commercial audience. You kind of understand that situation. But coming from a reality show here in Cyprus and developing the first English-speaking dramas here on Cypriot TV and working within my own visions of, you know, stories called Trapped, Finding Claire, things like that, very kind of high-concept stories that I've created. And I tried to pitch these in America, and they wanted to kill them. And so this is what happens when you go to Hollywood. When the corporates start interfering with the creative process, you have a problem. Zack Snyder and David Ayer and everyone who worked with Zack alongside him, with Zack's vision. Zack had a high concept vision of the DC Extended Universe from Man of Steel. He had a plan for 3 Justice League movies, a Ben Affleck Batman movie, which would have been fucking amazing. Yes, it would have been better than the Batman. I'm already getting unsubs every day. I couldn't give a shit. That's my opinion. I like the Batman. I believe Ben Affleck's movie would have been better because I've read the fucking script myself. Very few people have read that whole script. I have, and I can tell you it's fucking heartbreaking, compelling, and fucking amazing, and even funny in a couple of places. We were fucking robbed. David Ayer was robbed. Composer Stephen Price was robbed. As I said earlier, how can you have the knowledge that David Ayer's movie is gathering dust in a vault somewhere but fucking start crying about Batgirl? This is a disgusting situation, everyone. Restore the Snyderverse. Release the Ayer cut. Let's fucking go. Let's do this. Mr. Zaslav, there is money to be made. If indeed you are going with a Worlds of DC scenario and not just one confined, extended, connective universe, then I think you're onto a very, very exciting thing. The DCEU can continue. The Batmanverse can continue. The Jokerverse, the Black Label universe can continue. And why not? Why can't the Snyderverse continue separately somewhere in this new 10-year plan? I say, let's do this. Yesterday on Twitter, they released a photo image of Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And I found it such an uncompelling piece of photography for a film. And I was shocked how uncompelling and unmoved I was from the image. I've been to film school. I've learned how to photograph things. And one thing we can say about the DCEU, whether you like the DCEU or not, or you can throw the box offices or this or that at me, one thing we can say, there's so many amazing, groundbreaking, historical cinematic moments photographed so beautifully in the DCEU. 15 best DCEU movie scenes ranked: Justice League, Aquaman, and more. Few franchises have failed to find their footing quite like the DCEU. But the thing is, it had a footing. It had a high concept kind of range to it in the early days. If only they showed faith in that. Whether it was external forces like actors getting tied up in controversy or internal changes of creative direction every couple of years, Warner Brothers' superpowered efforts have never been able to get the traction, at least critically, that other names in the business have. But isn't that part of the problem with critical journalism today? Zack Snyder's film should have been praised to the hill. High concept, beautifully shot pieces of cinema, well written as far as I'm concerned, great movies. And there's a great list here of all the best sequences in DCEU history. Better than anything we've ever seen in the MCU. And now, nearly 10 years into the DCEU, the winds of change are blowing yet again. Since WB merged with Discovery and David Zaslav took over as CEO, a realignment of the DC strategy has been high on the to-do list, something that we discussed on the first part of today's show. With these latest changes comes news that WB Discovery is looking for a new guiding voice to hopefully shepherd in an era of prosperity for the franchise, something that will likely require a reset of the established canon. Now that's an interesting thought, because this is what we've discussed on this channel before. Is the DCEU going to continue, or are they just going to start again? We'll have to wait and see, but that's not what we're talking about here. As Zaslav and Co.'s finger looms over the reboot switch, one should celebrate the good that has come in the last 9 and a bit years of DC's big screen storytelling. So from Birds of Prey to Zack Snyder's Justice League, from Superman's first flight to the Joker's last laugh, here are the best moments from the DCEU thus far. 15, the amusement mile Birds of Prey. Starting off the list is the sequence that finished one of the DCEU's best reviewed movies. That's funny and shows you how bad critical media is today. Sorry about that, the sun was beaming in and ruining my picture, so I hope it's a little bit better for you now. Anyway, let's continue. The battle at the amusement mile is some of the most fun in this franchise and perfectly showcases why Margot Robbie's first solo adventure as Harley Quinn had to be R-rated. Really? You think? Anyway. The entire sequence features plenty of blood fun as Harley and Birds of Prey team up to take down wave after wave of goons. It all happens with the delightfully colourful backdrop of Gotham City's amusement mile, soundtracked by Hearts of Barracuda. The entire fight plays out more like a Jackie Chan martial arts romp than the typical superhero CGI finale, and was the perfect way to end an overall pretty fun movie. Now listen, I think Cathy Yan is a capable director. She's not very good at shooting action, and she proved it. Now listen, I actually think that Birds of Prey has a lot of great moments in it and some really stylized piece of shooting and even slow-mo in some places. I don't think it's a totally terrible movie. Its commentary is very, very toxic, but I think it's a solid movie, but it did flop at the box office. 14, The Trench Dive, Aquaman. I absolutely love this scene. Next up is the visually stunning moment known as Aquaman's trench dive. This small nugget of gold comes as Jason Momoa's Arthur Curry and Amber Heard's Mera try to fight off the trench, a terrifying breed of monster from the ocean's darkest depths who had their own DC movie planned at one point. Yeah, it would have been fucking awesome, and they cancelled it. After lighting a flare and being overwhelmed by the bloodthirsty foes, Arthur and Mera dive into the ocean, launching into one of the most painterly moments of the DCEU. As the pair plunge into the waves, the camera punches a way out, with the lighting above the water and the red light of the flare below being the only two things lighting the scene. This creates a jaw-dropping effect where all the viewer is seeing is Momoa's Aquaman drifting ever downward while surrounded by a swarm of the trench. This is a small snippet of a nearly 2.5 hour underwater epic, but it's the one scene that many keep coming back to. Listen, Aquaman is a high concept, stunning movie, and it truly is a success story. 13, The Nightmare Stinger, Snyder Cut. Coming in the epilogue chapter of Zack Snyder's 4-hour Justice League cut, it's the nightmare sequence. While there had been teases of this glimpse of the future before, this was the first time that fans got fully immersed in what Snyder's vision for a potential nightmare story would have looked like down the line. The entire scene takes place outside a dusty, decrepit city, with Ben Affleck's Batman leading a team that includes Amber Heard's Mera, Ezra Miller's Flash, and Jared Leto's Joker. And of course, Deathstroke. Leto's clown prince of crime was the kicker here, as the actor had not been seen in the role since 2016's Suicide Squad. Joker reveals to the audience that Affleck's Caped Crusader let Lois Lane die before the team is confronted by a visible, angry and ready to kill Superman. It's a super fan servicey sequence and is a little out there, but so is the rest of Zack Snyder's Justice League, and for the most part, this fan service hits. It's not fan service. The nightmare vision is part of Zack's vision. It isn't fan service. So sorry, you're wrong. This is the difference between fans writing and someone who, prides themselves as being a journalist. These Access Media journalists are typical of the shit they say. It's like adding a Birds of Prey sequence to the best scenes in the DCEU. But anyway, I'm just proving a point by reading this to you, that we have so many stunning sequences in the DCEU, things we should be proud of. It's something that the MCU don't do very well because they're lazy and they just want to get their stuff out there. They're not making high art. 12. Harley escapes the Suicide Squad. James Gunn and Harley Quinn were a match made in heaven, and that fact is no more evident than in Harley's escape in the Suicide Squad. This action sequence is so definitively Harley Quinn. It's fun, disturbing and over the top in the absolute best way. After being captured and separated from the rest of the squad, Robbie's Harley Quinn goes on a killing spree. She breaks necks with her fires, does a gunpowder pirouette and ends it off with a flower power machine gun joyride. This scene is so fun while capturing the essence of Quinn as a character and Gunn's style as a filmmaker. It looks pretty good. But the irony isn't lost on me that it's okay for Harley, a woman, to be killing all these men, but as soon as Peacemaker or Bloodsport kill anyone, it's a demonstration of toxic masculinity. The irony isn't lost on me. 11. Barry jumps back in time, Batman v Superman. Barry Allen jumping back in time to talk to Bruce Wayne in Batman v Superman was one of the first indications of a larger DCEU plan and had fans vibrating back in 2016. The sequence is short and sweet, but was one of the many teases in Dawn of Justice for what Zack Snyder had in store with his plan for the franchise. A great plan. It happens about midway through Batman v Superman when Bruce has dozed off while sitting at the Batcomputer. It is then that Ezra Miller's Barry Allen, aka The Flash, tears a hole in reality in front of the DC Playboy pleading, "Find us, Bruce! You have to find us!" This sets Affleck's character on the path to eventually forming the Justice League, something DC fans were itching to see on screen for years. 10. Storming the beach, The Suicide Squad. The moments on the list are sort of divided into two camps. There is the world-building bucket and the eye-catching action scene bucket. This one falls firmly into the latter, serving as the opening of 2021's The Suicide Squad. The storming of the beach, the first mission, is some of the most fun one can have in the DCEU. Leading into James Gunn's DC debut, there was much talk about the extensive cast in The Suicide Squad. Whether it was Nathan Fillion, Pete Davidson or Michael Rooker, fans were amped to see all these actors take on these various DC roles. Well, only a small handful of them actually make it. And actually, I thought he was going to be sarcastic about the fact that only a few people went to see this film, which is shocking to me because it's a really good DC movie. Past the opening mission, brutal death after brutal death, audiences were shown that no one is safe apart from Harley Quinn. In this, making the beachfront battle one of the most shocking DCEU moments of all time, and thus one of the best. Well, no, not one of the best. It's good, it's well shot, I like it. Not one of the best. 9. Shazam tests his powers. Shazam. Back in 2019, Shazam asked the question, what would a kid do if they got superpowers? And in the thrilling 80s feel-good comedy fashion, it delivered answers. That is why Shazam testing his powers is one of the best moments of the DCEU, as young Billy Batson and friend Freddie Freeman begin to realise just what had happened with Batson's newly acquired superpowered persona. They, as any child of 2010s, would record it all and post it to YouTube. The problem with doing it like that, and the way they did that, which is great, it was funny that it was on YouTube, but in about 10-20 years' time, this film would have aged very well, because who knows where we're going to be with the internet. There may not be an internet anymore. Who knows? This entire sequence set to Queen's Don't Stop Me Now is a joy. It features everything from charging people's phones with godlike lightning powers to attempting to leap a building in a Superman-like fashion and crashing into the 33rd floor in the process. It's a superpower training montage fans have seen over and over again in comic book movies, but done in a new and original way that shines in its execution. 8. Ratcatcher 2 versus Starro, The Suicide Squad. Now, the third act of James Gunn's The Suicide Squad is absolutely stunningly shot. No question about that. There are a few moments in movie history that have the ability to make one smile, have their stomach turn, and move them to tears all at the same time. Ratcatcher's final stand against Starro in The Suicide Squad does exactly that. Coming out of James Gunn's bloody 2021 romp, Daniela Melchior, who was absolutely fantastic in that film, wasn't she, as Ratcatcher 2, was a fan favourite, and this is why. As a final stand against the Kazoo-like villain, Ratcatcher summons hordes of rats. This results in an emotional swell of redemption for a character who, like the other members of the Suicide Squad, are not traditional movie heroes by any means. After seeing a few people eaten alive by the swarm of rodents, audiences are treated to a flashback of the original Ratcatcher 2's father, telling his daughter that rats are the lowliest and most despised creatures. My love, if they have a purpose, so do we. It's a sequence that may look a little silly from the outside, but in the context of the film, in one of the rawest and most emotional moments in the DCEU, not to mention being scored to perfection, it shouldn't be in the list. But this guy is trying to show us a mix of stuff. That's okay, it's up to you. 7. Flash uses the Speed Force, Snyder Cut. Next up is the scene that took the prize for last year's Oscar fan cheer moment. And I mean, they accused the Snyderverse fandoms of being bots and only bots making these votes. It's obviously the best fucking moment and should have been chosen. Let's be honest. So I say, well done the bots. It's the Flash using the Speed Force in Zack Snyder's Justice League. Happening at the climax of the film, Ezra Miller's Barry Allen is forced to break his one rule and go faster than the speed of light in order to turn back time after it seems the Justice League has failed and all hope is lost. He does this muttering to himself along the way, telling his dad that he was one of them. He was the one of the Justice League. It's this Peter Parker, oh fuck off, stop comparing us with Marvel. Peter Parker-esque kid that ends up saving the universe, at least for now. Doing so with visually stunning effects all around him and a ripping Junkie XL score blaring in the background in a franchise that has had a lot of misses. This was certainly not one of them. Well, I don't think the misses come from Zack Snyder's universe. They come from the other movies that were implemented by stupid people. Stop talking about the DCEU missing. Most of all, the DCEU is a high concept franchise and one I'm quite proud of. But you keep on shilling the MCU. 6. The Trinity unites Batman v Superman. While maybe not as effective as the spin around shoot in 2012's The Avengers, you absolute prick. You absolute prick. The Trinity standing together in BVS is one of the most stunning moments in superheroic history. And you're trying to say Avengers has a better sequence? No, you're wrong. This is more iconic. This was that moment for DC Superfans. Coming at the tail end of Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, the trio of Henry Cavill's Superman, Ben Affleck's Batman and Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman teamed up to take on the monstrous Doomsday. The three have not been seen together on screen much since then, but at the time, this was DC's Avengers moment. It wasn't an Avengers moment, it was just a fucking DC moment. This was supposed to be the beginning of something that fans of DC Comics have been waiting for since the inception of the Justice League, and that is why it ranks so high on this list. 5. Welcome to the Planet, Man of Steel. It's funny actually, so far, I don't know the rest of this list by the way, so far we've had some interesting selections. This is the first Man of Steel moment. If they don't add any more Man of Steel stuff, it's going to be very disappointing. Because Man of Steel has some of the most visually stunning moments in DC Extended Universe history. Another moment that was supposed to be the beginning of something special was the Welcome to the Planet scene at the end of Man of Steel. The final minutes of Henry Cavill's debut as Superman perfectly encapsulate what makes the character so special. The sequence depicts Cavill's Kryptonian reminiscing about his adopted father, Jonathan Kent, before finally taking up refuge on his own amongst the people of Earth. It is the Metropolis portion of the scene that is so incredibly special. The tone captured as Clark Kent enters the Daily Planet for the very first time is one that has seldom been seen in the franchise since. Yeah, and I think that's a tragedy because they do capture that lighter tone that you need in a Superman story. They captured it in the end. One of the controversies of this movie is that we didn't see Clark Kent in the Daily Planet for the whole movie till the ending. But when you get to that ending, it really works. After Clark tours the office under the sound of him telling his mother in Kansas about finding a job where he can keep his ear to the ground, he is greeted by Amy Adams' Lois Lane. Lane gives him a handshake and puts the bow on everything by saying, "Welcome to the planet." A brilliant double entendre that was the perfect way to end the first movie in the DCEU. It is a fucking great ending. She already knows him. She knows he's Superman. She's having a bit of fun with him, and it's great. 4. The warehouse fight, Batman vs Superman. This is Zack Snyder at his best. There's nothing in the MCU that can compete. End of. No best DCU moments list would be complete without what some might call the greatest Batman fight scene of all time. 2 greatest Batman moments that I've seen is the Batmobile chase in BVS and this warehouse fight scene. Yes, this Batman kills and it's pretty evident in this sequence, but the whole warehouse fight from Batman v Superman is the most brutal and most engaging the Dark Knight has ever been fighting on screen. From beginning to end, this whole fight is thrilling. Ben Affleck's Batman zips around, breaking arms, lodging batarangs into goons, and literally slamming people through walls. It might not have the emotional weight that some of these other moments do, but this is a fight choreography done flawlessly. No CGI gimmicks or 10-story walking starfish, just the Dark Knight, his fists, and a whole lot of force, and it's absolutely stunning. especially if you see it in IMAX. 3. No Man's Land Wonder Woman. This is a beautiful sequence, and this was clearly shot by Zack Snyder and not Patty Jenkins. Don't fucking at me. Starting off the top 3 here is the No Man's Land set piece from Patty Jenkins, should we say Zack Snyder's Wonder Woman. Everyone loves a superhero debut, but this one was special, as Gal Gadot's Amazonian and her team of soldiers are pinned down in the trenches of France. She decided she needs to do something, and thus goosebumps were induced. Diana climbs up over the edge of the trench in full Wonder Woman regalia as the music swells, and let's just say Rupert Gregson-Williams, if it isn't Junkie XL, Rupert Gregson-Williams and Junkie XL and Hans Zimmer have been the best 3 composers in this franchise. They don't use Rupert anymore, and I'm stunned why they don't, why he's not scoring the Flash movie, and why the other guy from Shazam is scoring. I found his music in Shazam a little bit underwhelming, and I thought Rupert Gregson-Williams was the better choice for the Flash movie. So I really like Rupert's music. He also scored After Christmas, again, one of a really good movie. I'm getting into Christmas now, early, don't care again, don't at me. He's such a good composer. Anyway, and the world looks upon her for the very first time. This is an action scene with emotional weight behind it, as Gadot's hero slowly pushes forward, throwing aside anything the enemy sends her way. In World, this was Wonder Woman's coming out party, and it plays beautifully even more than 5 years later. So I'm just going to skip to what they put as number 1 for a laugh. I'm not going to tell you till we get to it. Interesting. Well, it's from the right movie, but not necessarily, I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting choice. Anyway, First Flight, Man of Steel, is at number 2. It's hard to beat the first flight from Man of Steel. It was a scene that was so good, Zack Snyder basically did it again in his recut of Justice League. This sequence spotlights Henry Cavill's Superman as he tested his powers for the first time as an adult. After being told all his life to hide his gifts, this is the moment he overcomes that. Upon emerging from an ancient Kryptonian ship stuck in the ice of the North Pole, Cavill's hero attempts to take flight for the first time as the words of his Kryptonian father, Jor-El, played by Russell Crowe, echo through his head. As the Hans Zimmer score begins to build, Kal-El finally gets it, bounding off the ground and into the sky above. Director Zack Snyder takes the viewer on a ride through Earth's atmosphere as the film's hero finally realizes why he is special and comes to terms with his gift. It's exhilarating to watch, and that is why it comes in at number 2. At number 1, the ending, Justice League. And last but certainly not least is the Up in the Sky ending from the original. I just realised something. You know what they put at number 1? The ending scene from Justice League. They're actually giving the ending scene from Justice League as number 1 of all the greatest moments in the DCEU. I should really start proofreading this shit. Anyway, let's go through it. Let's have a laugh. And at last but certainly not least is the Up in the Sky ending from the original 2017 cut of Justice League. Yes, the best DCEU moment up to this point comes from what might be one of the most lauded movies of all time. But it is in these final 3 or 4 minutes that WB should just glimmer that they had finally figured out what the DCEU should be. I'm not wrong, am I? He's talking about fucking Justice League. The franchise thrives well, it focuses on the symbols of hope and these superheroes can be. Sure, it is not the rip-rockling good time that something like the MCU... Who is this fucking journalist? He's a troll. But it doesn't need to be the dark and gritty affair that has been all too often as well. As evidence in this scene, Amy Adams' Lois Lane narrates over a montage of the film's heroes, all serving as symbols for the newly saved world. Fans get a glimpse at Barry the Flash talking to his dad in prison, Aquaman, and diving amongst the waves, and Gal Gadot's Diana Prince with Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne setting up Justice League headquarters, which we actually do see in Zack's movie as well. All this wraps up as Lois touches on the topic of hope once again, saying these heroes were here the whole time to remind us that hope is real, that you can see. All you have to do is look up in the sky. Listen, it ain't fucking terrible, but it's actually very toxic to choose this as the top fucking moment. Her monologue comes to a close as Henry Cavill's Clark Kent rips open his trench coat and shoots into the air as Superman. In conclusion, it is this moment that perfectly distills what the DCEU can and should be. It's that despite all the added baggage and misses here and there, the potential for these stories is endless. All it takes is a little hope. We want to see hope in our superhero stories. And Zack Snyder gives us hope, gives us great hope in certain instances. And he's done that, but he's a high concept, compelling storyteller. And there's nothing wrong with that. And saying that a Justice League fucking moment is the best moment in DCEU history shows you how little you know about storytelling, about superheroes, and about comic books. And it proves that you're just an MCU fucking shill that just wants to see bright fucking colours, and that's the end of that. What are my favourite moments? What would be top in my moment? I think the moment in Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman, when what's it called? I forgot what it's called all fucking ready. Let's go back. What's it bloody called? I just read it, but I need to get this right because I want to talk about this a bit. Here we go, No Man's Land. The No Man's Land sequence is probably my favourite moment in superhero history. And there's a lot of great moments in superhero history, so I don't take saying that lightly. Why is No Man's Land my favourite? Especially in the DCEU. And look, I'm not taking away anything else, but I think it's perfect. Not only is this stunning to watch, it's very emotional. This is Wonder Woman's coming of age moment, her coming out party, as this idiot put it. So it's so powerful. It looks stunning. It looks superhero-y. It's shot in a kind of slow-mo. You see her batting away the bullets. Then she starts running. It's her moment. It's emotional. It's compelling. It excites you. It brings you to tears, almost. That's why it's my favourite DCEU moment. And finally today, we talk about the Flash movie yet again because Geekosity and Mickey Sutton have done an interesting thing, and I think we need to read this because the headline is very, very interesting. Nearly half want Ezra Miller's The Flash cancelled in recent poll. That means audiences are kind of divided on this situation. That basically means that this movie's box office could be severely hit. Written by Mickey Sutton, editor-in-chief and owner. A recent study reveals that nearly 50% of the general public wants Ezra Miller's The Flash shelved on the surface. The number is extraordinarily high without a doubt. Ezra Miller's legal issue has polarized audiences. So the survey was conducted by Morning Consult, conducted the survey. Their research consisted of asking 2,210 adults in the US whether or not you feel that is a representative sample of the overall population is clearly up to you. Furthermore, we haven't seen much of the film. In other words, minds can change once Warner Brothers Discovery release a lengthy trailer. Here's the thing. It's not about the movie. They don't want it cancelled because of the movie. They want it cancelled because Ezra Miller has perpetuated in many demonstrations of abusive behaviour, and that's why people think he doesn't deserve the treat in being in a released movie. Anyway, it's easy to dismiss something that feels like a blank page. Secondly, Morning Consult placed this together before Ezra Miller issued a public apology. Thus, a number of those polled could have switched sides after that. Still, this research doesn't paint a rosy picture of The Flash, Morning Consult revealed. If the actor-actress is accused of all of the above actions, as Miller has been, more than 2 in 5 US adults, 42%, said the studio should cancel the film and never release it. Meanwhile, a third said the film should be postponed and refilmed with different actor. Only 14% thought it should be released as is. Fucking hell. 14%. Over 2,000 people voted, only 14% thought it should be released as is. Now, this is a debate we've been having on here for a very long time. Quite frankly, this includes too many ifs. Moreover, even the most reliable polls have failed dramatically, even perhaps none more than in 2016. Many surveys erroneously gave Hillary Clinton the presidency. Why are we talking about politics? Who gives a fuck? We're talking about a film here, not Hillary Clinton. Anyway, nevertheless, this proves Warner Brothers Discovery and Miller have more damage control to do. Sources confirm that Warner Brothers Discovery's commitment to The Flash. They spent more than $200 million on this film. Therefore, it cannot fail. Well, by these results, we can see that it will fail financially. However good or bad the movie is, it's no longer about the film. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is no longer about that film. It's about Amber Heard and whether she stays or goes within that picture. These are the issues facing Zaslav. Miller's performance reportedly impressed studio executives, especially WBD CEO David Zaslav. Yeah, of course it did. Thus, they want him to remain as the Flash. With Miller, they have a young rising star with unfulfilled potential. Listen, Mikey Sutton wants to see the restoration of the Snyderverse. That's great. He knows that Ezra's important to that. But unfortunately, it's a messy situation. And I don't think he'll play the Flash again. And that's simply the situation I can foresee. And you could be a Snyderverse fan like me, but I'm not going to say that Ezra Miller should keep his job after everything he's done. That's fucking ridiculous and biased. According to YouTube personality Seal Abdul, a very biased Snyderverse fan, just thought I'd tell you, The Flash experienced massive rewrites and reshoots. In fact, Vanity Fair confirmed Miller is shooting additional scenes as Zaslav has trashed the reboot idea for DC films, which I've been saying all along. The Flash has to reflect that they're moving mountains to ensure this movie succeeds. Of course, now, we don't actually know if it's had heavy rewrites. This is just Abdul. We don't know if it's going to have big reshoots. Some people say this film's finished production, so it's an interesting situation. At the moment, this survey is a footnote, nearly forgotten. Warner Brothers Discovery hopes to debunk it in 2023. So it's going to be an interesting situation. This is what happens when you put the almighty dollar before common sense. Listen, the DCEU is a problem because we get all these debates. We had like that Justice League scene in the Black Adam footage the other day. And people got angry. And this is what's going on. What's canon? You know, I made the point the other day that in Shazam, Superman's there. We don't see Cavill, but Superman's there in a red and blue suit, right? So what's canon then? That he wears red and blue in that movie? Because Snyder wanted him to wear the black, I think, all through, I think, Justice League 2, and maybe even in Justice League 3. I can't remember what Zack said. So it's a problem. But this is what Zack said. That his verse now is separate to the DC Extended Universe. That's a way of getting around it. These are very, very complicated issues. But what's not complicated is that Ezra Miller has been involved in alleged criminal, abusive, violent, aggressive behavior. And whether they have been abused or, been made fun of or, whatever the circumstances around it, there's not a place for violence in any civilization. And you're an elite actor. You don't get to do it because you're a famous actor with fans and people love you. You are supposed to be the beacon that children are looking up to. The fucking Flash. And this is your example for being a hero. No, Ezra. Do better starting from now. There's no question about it, and surely Warner Brothers Discovery understands this, that the Black Adam movie will make a hell of a lot more money with Henry Cavill's Superman cameoing in it without it cameoing. It's a huge opportunity for the DCEU to relaunch in a very exciting way where they actually start giving the fans what they want. Here's the thing. It's a very difficult thing to do. Now, I don't know if they've done it or been able to do it or not, because you had to get Henry Cavill to do it. Henry Cavill is doing a Highlander movie. He was up to recently filming The Witcher season 3. We know he allegedly had COVID in the middle of that shoot and he went missing from that set. That could have been when he shot his Black Adam sequence or another cameo sequence or a bunch of them. Who knows? He was away for at least a month, I think, from the Witcher set. So that's interesting in itself. So there's lots of situations. We also know he didn't turn up to San Diego Comic-Con. What was he doing then? Was he filming The Witcher like we were told? Or was he doing some cameo shoots? Who knows? Who knows what's going on? But in under a month's time, we're going to find out. All I'm saying is that if they could have done it, they should have done it, because there's a lot of money to be made, because everyone loves Superman. Everyone loves Cavill as Superman. Let's do this. Let's rebuild this brand by giving the fans what they want and creating some great superhero movies and content. And the first idea that Zaslav has is the best he's had. Release everything via the cinematic, the cinema. That's what we want. We want these movies in cinemas. I don't want them released on HBO Max first. I don't want HBO Max DC series because I don't get access to that. Half the fucking world don't get access to that. So let's make the right decisions. The Batgirl shelving was the right decision at the end of the day. Let's move forward. Let's make the right decisions for all DC fans. This has been Movies TV Mad with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. And I'll see you in the next video. Until I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.